Hey everyone, so what you're looking at here is genuinely one of the coolest and honestly rarest pieces I've ever had the chance to get my hands on. It looks like a CZ75 pistol, but it has a pretty big secret. It can fire in full auto. And trust me, its wild design is just the beginning of its story.
Right, so this is not something you can just go out and buy. It's an incredibly rare firearm with a really fascinating backstory, and we're going to break it all down piece by piece. We'll start with the legendary pistol that it's based on.
Okay, so to really understand this pistol, we have to go back to the original, the CZ75. It was born back in 1975 in what was then Czechoslovakia, and this handgun had a design so good, it's still being produced today. It's an absolute icon.
Now, the story of this pistol gets really tangled up in the Cold War. You see, Czechoslovakia couldn't get international patents for the design, so it basically became open-source hardware. Before you knew it, manufacturers all over the world, we're talking China, the US, Brazil, started making their own versions. And that, right there, is a massive testament to just how brilliant the original design was. It really cemented its place in history.
So that brings up a pretty obvious question, right? If the CZ75 is so amazing, why aren't fully automatic pistols a common thing? Well, I've had the chance to shoot a lot of them, and I can tell you there are two really fundamental reasons they just never caught on.
It really all boils down to two things. First, practicality. A handgun firing a service cartridge in full auto is, well, it's almost impossible to control. Sure, you can add a stock, but then you've just made a really clumsy, awkward submachine gun, and you've lost the whole point of a pistol, its small size. Then you have the legal side of things. In pretty much every country, automatic weapons are so heavily restricted that they end up being these luxury toys for very, very serious collectors, not a practical tool for anyone else.
But you know, there's always an exception to the rule, right? And in this case, it's a huge one. The famous Mauser C96 Schnellfeuer from the 1930s. They made nearly 100,000 of these things, which makes it a total historical outlier. It's probably the most common automatic pistol ever made.
And this chart really shows you just how much of an outlier that Mauser was. The legendary Soviet Stechkin pistol, only about 20,000 of those were made. The Italian Beretta 93R, just over 2,000. And the original factory-made CZ75 automatic, a tiny 2,300. Yeah, the Mauser really is in a league of its own.
So let's zoom in on that factory original for a minute, the CZ75 automatic. They made them in small batches between 1995 and 2007, and it was an interesting idea, but a deeply, deeply flawed one.
The idea was to sell it to police special units, but it had some major problems. First, no stock, and for a foregrip, you were supposed to attach a spare magazine upside down. Now, a magazine baseplate is just not designed to take that kind of stress. It would just snap right off. You combine that terrible design with a crazy fast fire rate of over 1,000 rounds per minute, and, well, you've got a recipe for a completely impractical weapon.
So what's the most important feedback? It's from the guys who are actually supposed to use it, right? The Czech police units tested it out, and their verdict was simple and pretty damning. The thing is completely uncontrollable, and we just don't need it. And that's exactly why it was a commercial failure and why it's so incredibly rare today.
Okay, so the original was a flop. But that failure leaves a really interesting what-if hanging in the air. The original concept was flawed, sure, but what if you could redesign it from the ground up with modern techniques and really focus on solving those exact problems?
And that is exactly where this custom pistol comes in. It was built by a brilliant gunsmith, a friend of mine named Libor Novák. And just to give you a sense of his talent, this is a man who, in his own workshop, engineered and built a small series of semi-automatic 50 caliber rifles. He is a true master of the craft.
A few months ago, he told me he was working on something special. And he wasn't just modifying an old CZ75. No. He was building a new one, almost entirely from scratch. He had a new frame custom cast just for this project, and he machined the slide himself. He basically took the failed idea of the CZ75 automatic and decided he was going to perfect it.
And this is the result. It's called the LN75FA. LN for his name, Libor Novák, and FA for full auto. He was originally going to make a series of 15, but one of the frame castings had a tiny defect, so only 14 will ever exist in the entire world. This isn't just a gun, it's a collector's piece of the absolute highest order.
So what exactly did he do to make this version so much better than the original factory model?
Libor Novák didn't just copy the old design. He went through and systematically engineered a solution to every single one of its failures.
Just take a look at the difference here. He dropped the rate of fire from that frantic 1,000 rounds per minute to a much more manageable 750. He designed a solid, quick-detach polymer stock. He got rid of that fragile magazine grip and replaced it with a sturdy, dedicated 3D printed foregrip, and to top it all off, he added a 3-port compensator to the muzzle to fight recoil and keep the barrel from climbing. Literally every single change directly fixes a flaw in the original.
So, how does it actually shoot? Well, with the stock on, you can genuinely keep a full burst inside a 25-centimeter group at 15 meters. For a machine pistol, that is seriously impressive. But, physics is still physics. By the time you get out to 50 meters, the spread is just way too wide to be practical. It just goes to show that even with brilliant engineering, the whole concept has its limits. So what's the little piece of mechanical magic that makes this all work? It's a part called the auto sear. Think of it like a tiny gatekeeper inside the gun. When you flip it to full auto, every time the slide slams forward to load a new round, it hits this little switch, which instantly tells the hammer to fall again. And that's what gives you that continuous fire, as long as your finger is on the trigger. Even taking it apart tells you something about the craftsmanship. The basic steps are pretty standard for a CZ75, but the fit and finish on this thing are so incredibly tight, way better than the factories, that it takes extra precision. For example, you have to unscrew that custom compensator before the barrel can even come out. It's just another little sign of the incredible precision that went into building this gun.
So, after all of that incredible engineering, all that craftsmanship, what's the final verdict? What's the real purpose of a firearm like this in the modern world?
The honest truth is, it's a lot more romantic than it is practical. For any real-world job, a purpose-built submachine gun is just better in every single way. Even with this amazing pistol, a few well-aimed single shots are way more effective than just spraying in full auto. It's an answer to a question that, practically speaking, not many people are asking.
So its true value isn't as a practical weapon at all. It's a fascinating masterpiece of engineering. It's unbelievably fun to shoot. And as one of only 14 that will ever exist, it's an absolutely incredible collector's item. This is one of those brilliant objects that exist for the pure passion of craftsmanship, not for its utility.
And that kind of leaves me with one last thought for you. This pistol is a perfect example of something that is brilliantly engineered, but ultimately exists more as a piece of art than as a tool. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other brilliant things are out there that are best appreciated for the simple fact that they exist, rather than for what they can do?